Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I discovered in the first session that the 2 hours were not enough for what I wanted to cover in today's session. So I'm just going to get started right off the bat. It's 1:31 actually. Okay, Roja, so you've distributed the slides. Okay, so first of all, an update on me. As you can see, I can talk now, right? My voice is back, but I had a coughing fit in the first class, which interrupted the class for about 7 or 8 minutes. So that might happen in today's class as well. And if it happens, then you'll have to be patient for a few minutes while I recover my voice. Hopefully, it doesn't happen. We'll see. So I think I have some kind of a viral infection, which I did not have when I left the campus on Wednesday. So I since contracted it, quite independent from my losing my voice, it seems like. So don't get close to me. Okay, apparently there's a bunch of viruses spreading around. There's COVID as well and swine flu, and I might have had one of those. I might still have it. And I'm not out of the woods yet. I'm recovering. I'm low on energy, but I'm definitely feeling much better than I was even yesterday. And day before yesterday was just horrible. Okay, so that's the update on me. Yeah, so hopefully you guys are all doing okay, not suffering from any kind of illnesses, etc. But just be watchful. There's stuff going around. You might want to wear a mask. All right. I considered wearing a mask myself in speaking to you all, but it would have muffled my voice, and my enunciation would not have come through. So decided against it, but let's keep arm's length at least. Okay. Okay, so a few announcements. Oh, it's not on. So first off, you all know that there is a revised schedule. Right? Yeah, there it is. And here it is on your screen. And these 3 sessions we did last week, and this is August 5th. Today's session, so our session is from 1:30 to 3:20 p.m. So I'm kind of blocking that out. So you'll see that all of these sessions are about 2 hours long, the last one being, in fact, 2 hours on Friday. This is so that we make up the 12 hours, all right? Originally, we were supposed to meet 8 times, and now in the revised schedule, we are only meeting 7 times. So that's why these sessions have increased in length. You probably already guessed that or knew that, but I wanted to make that explicit. I also wanted to check in on the healthy lifestyle. I'm going to go through this relatively fast again, because I discovered in the first session that spending too much time on this means that I don't have time to cover the material. Hopefully it's going well. Just give me a thumbs up if it's going well. All right. Good. Very good. I can see the vast majority saying that it's going well. Do consider updating your progress on that Google Sheets that I sent out. I'm doing it myself. I've changed. I was going to work out after class every day, but I don't think I should do it, not just for my own health, but for the health of the others who go to the gym, right? So I just decided that I'm going to aim for something much lower, which is to just walk up and down from my office to the class rather than to take the elevator. Much lower level of physical activity, which anyway I was doing even before, but I'm just going to continue to do that. And that's going to be my new aim for the move part of the Eat, Move, Sleep. Roja is going to send out an email later today on the second assessment opportunity that you have. I don't know if I mentioned this, but we've paid for 160 people. 54 showed up, so we have 106 slots that they are willing to credit us. So please do take up this opportunity. Okay, if you have never especially measured your body fat percentage, I think it's useful as a metric to know where you stand. And some of you might be afraid of getting to know it, but you're young and it's better that you know now than kind of suffer the consequences later, right? And you might be pleasantly surprised, right? So do take up that opportunity. Look out for that email from Roja that's coming out later this afternoon. In fact, it will be from me, but we'll have one bullet point will be about this. It's going to be first come, first served, 106 slots, but we're going to prioritize people who went for the first measurement, so that you are kind of like confident that that measure was in fact accurate, and maybe even see some improvement because of having led a healthier lifestyle for a couple of weeks now. This part, final project, creative altruism part. Again, look for some information in the email. In the first class, we didn't have time for brainstorming. I was hoping that I would be able to carve out some 20 minutes for brainstorming. It looks unlikely, just the way that the class went. So, which means that kind of the onus is on you guys to brainstorm outside of class, unless we somehow manage to find a little bit of time tomorrow. But definitely read the instructions that will be attached to the email that goes out today, just so that you're familiar with what it is that you're expected to do in the assignment. Okay, and it's related to what I'm going to talk about today. Okay, so you'll get a little bit of a flavor for what it is that I'm expecting you to do. Okay, so any questions on any of these? No? All good? Okay, so very quickly, thanks to those who filled out the values Google Sheet. So you can see as a whole for your badge, family is probably number one as a value. Okay. And financial independence is pretty high. Peace of mind is another one that's high. And then love is high. Okay, trust. So a bunch of things here which point to kind of other people and relationships, right? Family, love, trust, etc. Relationships. This is how it breaks down from section A to section B. For section A, things that stood out for them that were different from your class were loyalty, peace of mind, and love. For you all, patience emerged as an important one, okay, which I think is good, because we are kind of increasingly impatient, right? And I think it's partly because of what marketers are doing. I'm kind of like a marketing professor, so I guess I have to take a little bit of a blame for it, some kind of a very indirect way, but we are a generation now, right? When we want something, we want it, and we want it now. So it's nice to see patience as a value that some of you want to prioritize. Trust emerged as another one, which is a little bit different from the other section. Okay, but really, family and relationships are important for both sections as a whole, not just for your class, around the world, which actually is very good for what I want to talk about in today's class. Very quickly, I want to summarize what we discussed in the first three sessions. It's very surprising because I thought that, we hit on these points quite a lot, but it may also be because section A, it was 9 a.m. and people were groggy. Nobody remembered a single thing of what we discussed last week on this particular set of topics. This idea that happier people are healthier, happier people are more objective, creative, happier people perform better in teams, earn more money, those kinds of things. And then definition, where we talked about happiness being related to pleasure, not just pleasure though, also positivity, and to meaning and purpose, right? Satisfaction from helping other people out, and satisfaction from doing things that are intrinsically motivating. And the easiest way to measure happiness being self-reports, asking people directly how happy they are. It's also very highly correlated with other more objective measures of happiness. So these are the set of topics that we covered in the very first session. And then the second session was almost entirely devoted to understanding the role of a healthy lifestyle and making it a huge priority for you all going forward in your life, not just life, to start out with in your first 2 years at BITSoM. Okay, so if things work out well, I will come back and teach you a kind of advanced version of this course in a year and a half. All right, so hopefully your vital stats would have improved by then. I don't know what's going to happen, right? This is the first time that we're actually doing it. So we'll see. But that's my hope that when I come back, at least a subset of you have taken this to heart and started to kind of reap the benefits of leading a healthy lifestyle. And so you don't need an kind of external motivation. It becomes a habit. Okay, so that's the idea. So we'll see. But I talked about healthy lifestyle and its importance, and I really can't overemphasize the importance of it. If you want to be a happier person, you have to feel happy at a cellular level, right? You have to feel like your body is healthy. And that really is, a function of your lifestyle. How healthy your food intake is, your eating habits are. That includes hydration, of course, and not, doing harmful things like smoking, etc. And of course, exercising on a regular basis, 3-4 times a week at least, and then getting adequate sleep. Okay, so it's a foundational practice, and it's something that you need to do consistently throughout your life. There is no kind of avoiding it. It's indispensable if you want to be a happy person. So that's why I focus so much on that. And then we talked about values and shadow values, which if we have time, I'll get to and connect it to today's topic and tomorrow's topic. We did not quite get to it in section 8. Okay, so those were the set of topics that we covered. And so now I want to dive into today's topic. But before I do that, again, any questions, any comments about any of these stuff? Okay. So today's topic is on relationships and on this need that researchers have termed the need to belong. And the idea is that we have a very high desire for connecting and developing, nurturing relationships. And basically, it points to this fact about human beings, which is that we are very, very highly social, right? Not just social as a species, but perhaps the most social species there is. And this is manifested in many different ways. One of the ways in which it's manifested is that love as an emotion is one of our most cherished emotions. And this is reflected in what we prioritize, what we value. You already saw on that kind of top 3 values list in the word cloud that relationships and family and love, etc., are very, very important, right? It's not surprising. This happens across the world in any class that I teach. This always emerges as one of the most important values for people. It's also reflected in popularity of romance or love as a genre in movies, in books, right? So over 70% of books, movies are on the topic of love. In Hollywood, it's probably 70-75%. In Bollywood, as they call it here, probably 95%, right? It's very, very popular as a topic. Also, if you ask people to recall an incident when they were really, truly happy, or, think about a past event in which they were significantly happy, and you kind of analyze what they write, more than 50% of the people end up writing about having a pleasant, positive time with another person, be it a romantic partner or with a family member or with a friend. Again, pointing to this idea that relationships are very, very important to us. The opposite of love is not hate. It's not even having the opportunity to connect with another person if you're confined to a prison cell, right? Where you don't even have the option of interacting with anyone. That's considered one of the worst experiences you could ever have, right? And there's actually a very good documentary on the topic by Discovery Channel on solitary confinement. If you're interested in the topic, you should kind of look it up. What it does to the brain not to have the ability to connect with another human being. It's also manifested in other kind of interesting ways, what I think find very kind of intriguing and interesting. So one of the ways in which it's manifested is through mimicry. right? We tend to subconsciously mimic what other people are doing. And the reason why we do it is because we know that our chances of fostering a good relationship with others increases if we convey to them that I'm like you, okay? So you're not a threat anymore if you're similar to other people. So oftentimes this happens somewhat subconsciously. So let's take a look at this.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with a white shirt, the lady with a trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality. But little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups.
So it's interesting that they have this canned laughter in the background, right? The video is funnier with that laughter in the background than without it. Okay, I've actually kind of tested for the funniness of the video with the laughter and without the laughter, and it's rated as significantly more funny when there is laughter, which is kind of at one level the same concept that we tend to mimic others, and so when we hear laughter, we are internally laughing as well a little bit more, and so then we end up finding it funnier. Okay, again, this is a manifestation of our need to belong and need to forge connections. We do it through mimicry. There are other manifestations of the importance of the need to belong. There was an experiment done called the cyberball experiment, where participants were told that we are testing a new video game for children, okay, and they were called into the lab. And these were adult participants, but they were told that, we want to make sure that there's no kind of technical glitches and things like that. So even though the game is eventually going to be played by little kids, we want you to test it. And then they were purportedly partnered with 2 other people, but in fact, they were playing the game by themselves, okay? And the 2 other people that they saw, so this is the participant, okay? And the 2 other people that they see on the screen is actually a computer program that's been programmed to behave in a certain fashion. So, okay? So the participants are told the idea is very simple. Whoever has the ball gets an opportunity to pass it to one of the 2 other players, and then they get the opportunity to pass it to the 2 players that they see, okay? So the game always begins with the ball with the participant, right? Because they're the only real human being. And so imagine that you are the participant and you pass the ball to this person. What would happen then would depend on which condition you were assigned to in the experiment. And so half the participants were assigned to what's called the social exclusion condition, which is what you see happening here, where the ball almost never comes back to you. In this particular animation, the ball actually never comes back to you, but in reality, in the social exclusion condition, it would come back about 10% of the time, which is far lower than how often it would come back to you if the other players were being fair, right? There are 3 players, so it should come back to you roughly 1/3 of the time, but it only comes back 10% of the time. Then clearly the other 2 players are favoring or disfavoring you, right? If you were assigned to the social inclusion condition, then the ball would come back to you roughly 35–40% of the time. Okay, so it'd be more fair. In fact, slightly in favor of you. Okay. So in one of the versions of this experiment, they actually wired the participants' brains in such a way that they could measure the brainwave activity, which parts of the brain were more active, blood was flowing to those parts of the brain. And what they discovered was really stunning. Okay, what they found is that in the inclusion condition, the parts of the brain that get activated when people experience relatively intense levels of pleasure, right? So if you're eating something really tasty or, snort cocaine, okay? That part of the brain was activated when people were included, right? So you go into a party and you're like scanning the room, if you know anyone, suddenly somebody shouts out your name, right? Hey, Raj, hey, come on over here, man, right? So you get a little bit of that boost of dopamine, okay? So that's what happens when you're included. In the social exclusion condition, the part of the brain that got activated is the part that gets activated when you're physically hurt, right? If you stub your toe against something or something slams against your fingers, right? So being socially excluded feels like physically being hurt, okay? So when somebody's going through a breakup, right, and they go to a friend and the friend says, you know what, forget the guy, right? He wasn't good for you anyway, right? Just forget him. Let's just focus on other things. It's probably the right advice, but it's also very, very difficult to do. It's like saying, oh, you just cut yourself and you must be going through a lot of pain, forget about it, right? It's just a physical cut. It doesn't, it's not easy to do, okay? In a follow-up study, which I found very interesting, what they did is that they put people in the social exclusion condition first, and then for half the participants, they gave them a painkiller like Tylenol, and then they measured how they felt half an hour later, once the pill had a chance to kick in, right? And what they found is among the people who had been given the Tylenol, they reported lower levels of psychological pain, okay? Which is consistent with this finding that the parts of the brain that get activated when you're socially excluded are the parts of the brain that get activated when you're physically hurt. Okay, so I'm not recommending if you're in the market for romance that you carry around a pill of Tylenol with you just in case you get spurned. But there is research that kind of backs up this idea that that might actually help, right? If you're socially spurned. Okay, so again, pointing to the importance of relationships for our health and our happiness. So here's another one. This is from an article in Science, which is the premier scientific outlet, okay, published by Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in 2003. What they did, he and his co-authors did, is ask the participants in the study to every evening over a course of a week, scan a bunch of activities that people routinely do, right? You can see those activities. Maybe you can't read them from the way back, but there's things like watching TV, taking care of children, etc. And every evening, look at all these activities and report how positive they felt when doing this activity and how negative they felt when doing the activity. Again, I measure positive and negative affect, right? The reason we want to measure both is because sometimes they're not perfectly negatively correlated. You could have an activity, as it turns out, spending time with children is not necessarily very positive, okay? In fact, there are some studies that show that people with children are actually a little bit less happy than people without children, okay? Controlling for age and things like that, and being married, etc. So children are not necessarily, bundles of joy, that we've been led to believe they are. They're actually somewhat irritating, okay? And can be a hassle, but they kind of add to meaning in our life, right? Again, going back to these different ways of defining happiness, they're not sources of positive emotions and pleasure necessarily, but they do contribute to meaning. Anyway, so this is what they did. And what you can see here is that the top two activities involve socializing, right? Number one is intimate relationships, basically spending time with somebody that you truly love. You feel that you can be yourself, let your hair down, just chill with them, right? So that's number one, socializing, even hanging out with friends who may not be super close to you, but nevertheless, if you hang out with them, that's number two, right? And it goes all the way down. And some of the most negative activities are also involve this dimension of other people, right? So hanging out with the boss is one of the worst things that can happen on average, right? And you may have been lucky to have had a good boss, but by and large, people don't like hanging out with the boss. And being alone. Okay, so here, this needs some commentary. This is not to say that sometimes we may want to be by ourselves, maybe watch a movie by ourselves, read a book, or meditate, or, go on a walk by ourselves. All that is good. That is seeking solitude. But if you feel that you really can't connect with anybody else, right? That you feel misunderstood or ununderstood. Nobody really seems to get you, right? So if you have this feeling, that's called loneliness. And loneliness is one of the fastest growing epidemics in the world, especially for men my age group, right? 50 plus. It's the fastest growing epidemic. And it is very intensely negative. And not only in terms of our feelings, but also in terms of the effects it has on our physical health. Blood pressure shoots up, diabetes rates are higher among people who feel lonely, and so on and so forth. Okay, so again, evidence that relationships are very, very important to us, which is, of course, one of the big points that the Waldinger TED Talk makes. So how many of you watched this? All right, good. I hope you liked it. I know it's, I think, very popular TED Talk for an important reason, right? So what do you guys remember from it? What stuck out to you from that TED Talk? Yeah? Right. People tend to rate money and fame and power and status and growth and achievements as being important. And they are, right? I mean, let's not kind of like scoff at those things. But if really, I mean, you wanted to prioritize the most important thing in terms of your happiness and longevity too, it turns out, right? How long you want to live, then it really is, there's no doubt, it is relationships. And what I found to be particularly telling is that compared to a bunch of people who were physically healthy, but did not have very good relationships in their lives, right? Their personal life relationships were not good. People who actually had problems, health problems, but had good relationships, ended up not just reporting greater levels of happiness, but ended up even living longer, right? Which is kind of surprising. So, if relationships are important to us, then obviously people want to prioritize relationships, right? So this is where we might end up committing what I call in my book a happiness sin, okay? But it's really a mistake that some of us make. And the mistake is to be too needy, too desperate for relationships. Okay, so I want to talk about the opposite of this in just a moment, which is to kind of keep relationships at bay, at arm's length, to avoid getting into relationships. If neediness is a happiness sin and it lowers your happiness levels, then you might think that the opposite of it is good, right? You become like a strong silent type, right? You're self-sufficient. You don't really depend on other people for your state of mind. It turns out that that's not a good thing either. And I'll talk a little bit about it. And actually, what's really interesting, and I'll cover some of the research that shows this, is that both this tendency to be needy and overly dependent on other people and what's called an anxious attachment style, right? You're anxious to feel love from other people. You can never get enough of hearing I love you, right, from other people. And you always want to be kind of, given positive strokes by other people and praised and given attention to and cared for and nurtured, etc. That is obviously not very good, right? But neither is the opposite of it. Okay, so why is feeling needy not good? Or being needy not good? At least a couple of reasons. Okay, one reason is that it actually makes you unattractive to other people, right? So maybe in the very initial days of courtship, etc., when another person is as into you as you're into them, they might actually like it that they can't get enough of you, right? But if they're constantly around you and want kind of affirmation from you that they're loved, etc., after a while, you start to take them for granted, basically. Okay. So this is an important, kind of an important and interesting part of human nature is that we value things that are somewhat difficult to get. Okay, we in fact start to undervalue things or take things for granted if they're too easily available. And actually in marketing too, in marketing contexts, you might see this unfolding. So sometimes they'll impose a limit on, when a sale lasts, right? Or they might impose a limit on how many quantities of something that you can buy. Or they might come up with a special edition someday, right? So the idea is that people value things that are a little bit difficult to get, right? So when I first moved to the United States when I was 26, I was single and, as they say, ready to mingle, right? I went on a date with this lovely person, and then I was very excited. I came back the next day to my PhD office and I told the people there, most of them were senior to me because I just joined, that I was going to call her again and try and see if I can go out again that evening. And they said, no, absolutely not. There's a rule in dating in the US, which is that you give it a couple of days, right? Because if you call them immediately, then they think that, oh, you're so easy to get. Even if they actually like you a lot and want you to call them, you want to leave them hanging a little bit. Okay, it sounds a little bit too strategic and cold, but this is human psychology, right? If in the end you want that outcome, then you better play by the rules of human psychology. Okay. Of course, you don't want to wait so long that they think that you don't have any interest in that, but you definitely need to wait a little longer. Okay, so that's the basic idea: is that other people won't find you attractive if you're too needy. But the more important reason is the story you tell yourself about who you are and how you value yourself, right? If you're so needy that your self-esteem, your standing, the way in which you evaluate yourself is dependent on whether or not you're tethered to this partner, right? I'm only of value, or I'm only worthy when I'm associated with this person because they prop me up, right? For whatever reason, maybe they're good looking, or maybe they are, highly achievement oriented. But if your happiness depends on being partnered with somebody else, you've kind of lost the ability to control your own happiness, right? So you don't want that. So that's another reason why you don't want to be needy in terms of your relationships. The story you have when you're needy is that I'm unworthy, I don't have value independent of other people to offer. I only become valuable because I'm tethered to or partnered with another person. The opposite of that is what's called going it alone, or in the literature, they call it avoidant attachment style. I'm going to talk a little bit about attachment styles in a couple of minutes, but so the neediness, which I covered earlier, is in the literature called anxious attachment style. People with an anxious attachment style have this desire to get affirmation from other people on a regular, consistent basis. The opposite of it is like, I don't know if you guys have seen this movie called Rambo, by Sylvester Stallone. It's an old movie, 40 years ago, came out. This guy goes on with the forest, forages by himself, and he's completely self-sufficient, and then ends up bringing down a whole town who's kind of against him, etc. So it's that kind of person, who can, the Ayn Randian ideal, really. I mean, read books by Ayn Rand. The idea is kind of appealing at some level, because the truth is that we are dependent on other people for our well-being, not just emotional, So to start out with physical survival even, right? For the first 8-10 years of our life, we could not have survived unless we got help from other people. So that's the truth about our nature. But therefore, it sounds appealing when somebody proposes to you that, hey, you don't need anybody else. You can be completely a self-sufficient individual, right? An island onto your own. But unfortunately, that's not how we are built, right? I'll talk a little bit about why it is the case that we are highly social and dependent on other people. But if you believe that you can be an island and it's appealing to you, then you might try this strategy. And it turns out that if you do it, then other people don't really consider you fully human at some level, right? If you're expressionless, if you don't really have the normal range of emotions that people tend to have, you don't have a normal desire to connect with other people, etc. In organizational contexts, people like that are thought to be unrelatable. So they kind of like, in subtle ways perhaps, but certainly over time, they kind of isolated, or they isolate themselves. Of course, they are the ones who are at some level to blame for it, but that's what ends up happening, that, they feel kind of segregated, and their chances of being promoted are lower after that, okay? Lowers the chance of being promoted and liked. And on top of it, the narrative that accompanies that kind of behavior is that I'm lonely, right? So for the needy person, the narrative is that I'm unworthy, or I'm ugly, or I'm, not of value, right? For a person who's avoidant, the story is that nobody seems to really be able to understand me fully, right? Nobody seems to be able to bridge over to me. And from my perspective, I don't kind of fully understand other people either, right? So that narrative that I'm lonely is a kind of a predominant story that people who are avoidant tell themselves, and that lowers their happiness. So the best kind of attachment style, right? I mean, this is a relatively complex research field, and I'm kind of simplifying it, oversimplifying it a little bit here. But if you think about the different attachment styles, basically I've talked about two thus far, right? Anxious attachment style, what I call neediness, and avoidant attachment style. Both of these are called insecure attachment styles. Okay? Insecure attachment styles. And they both are rooted in a desire for relationships. What in my book I call a desperation for love. The anxious attachment style is the more obvious manifestation of it, right? People are kind of like kicking and screaming, saying, "Hey, pay attention to me, love me," etc. The avoidant, actually, on the face of it, seem like they're not at all desperate for relationships, but really deep down they are. And I'll tell you why both of these seemingly opposite ends of the spectrum are rooted in the same underlying cause in just a little bit. But the healthy, I'll get to your question in just a moment. The healthy attachment style is called secure attachment style. So people with a secure attachment style are not desperate for relationships. They're not like, wanting other people to pour love and attention and kindness and compassion into their cup of relationships. They are pretty happy with themselves, okay? But at the same time, if a chance shows up to forge a relationship, be it romantic or otherwise, if they're single, for example, they won't spurn other people either. They won't kind of keep them at an arm's length. They are willing to be seen and willing to get close, psychologically, etc., to other people, emotionally to other people. So in a way, you can think of the secure attachment style as being kind of in the sweet spot between being too eager and being too aloof. Does it make sense? Okay, yeah, Gayatri.
So does anxious attachment style stem from possible abandonment issues of childhood?
Yeah, so I'm going to get to that. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So how do we find out about all of this? This is a fascinating area of research, to me at least. And it's got a fascinating history as well. Okay, it starts out with monkeys, actually. So there was this guy called Harry Harlow, who was a PhD from Stanford University on animal psychology, and joined the University of Wisconsin in 1931. And his main interest was to explore whether monkeys have intrinsic motivation, right? So human beings definitely have intrinsic motivation. We will do things even if it involves some level of pain, effort, etc., just because we're interested in it, right? Like we might pay good money to buy a video game, right? Playing the video game doesn't really give us any obvious rewards. It doesn't pay our bills. It doesn't, make us stronger. Maybe it does make us kind of more agile, but there are no kind of obvious rewards in terms of money, success, fame, etc., from playing these games, right? So we do things for the enjoyment of doing those activities, right? You might learn to play the guitar or play a sport. His question was whether monkeys have intrinsic motivation. And in order to test this, he needed monkeys, obviously, as participants in the study. And he was in Wisconsin, which is not very monkey friendly, right? So it's a very cold place in the US. So when he imported these monkeys from Africa, they would obviously kind of like, suffer because, it was very, very cold. So he had to build a warehouse that was temperature controlled and house the monkeys inside the warehouse. The problem was that if one of the monkeys got sick, then the other monkeys got sick because it was an enclosed environment, right? So it's kind of like a pandemic, right? If a monkey got sick, then it spread like wildfire and then sometimes kind of decimated the whole population of monkeys. So he countered that in two ways. The first thing he did was, rather than, import monkeys constantly from Africa, he had both male and female monkeys and he let them reproduce, right? So that he could generate his own kind of army of monkeys, so to speak. And on top of it, he started to kind of separate the baby monkeys as soon as they were born from their mothers, so that the chances of disease spreading between the monkeys was lowered, right? Because there was physical social distance, right? So this was happening for a while, and of course, monkeys are breastfed when they are born, right? And by separating the baby monkeys from their mothers, he was denying these baby monkeys an opportunity to get their kind of food and nutrition, right, through the breast milk. So he had to come up with an alternative to that, which is that he started to kind of, feed these baby monkeys with milk bottles, right? He basically had people who were sterilized wearing these kind of suits, and the baby monkeys were being fed through milk bottles that way. And everything seemed to be okay, right? He was continuing his experiments with his intrinsic motivation and things like that. Then fast forward a little bit. So we are now in the late 1940s, early 1950s. And he himself started to notice, but also other visitors to his kind of monkey lab, started to notice that these monkeys were a little more aggressive, a little bit different, psychologically kind of not healthy. Okay, so when baby monkeys or toddler monkeys are put together in a room, they're very similar to human beings, right? You take a couple of teenagers, put them in a room, they don't know each other, they'll be awkward, they'll try to pretend as if the other person doesn't matter a little bit. And then over time, they'll get curious and they'll want to know, okay, what do you do? What are your interests? And then routine things that we do, right, as human beings, that we'll signal to them that, hey, I'm interested in that too. Or, pretend as if you're cool and you're not interested. And all those kinds of things happen. But certainly, you don't have a case where completely ignore the other person for a huge amount of time. Or the very first interaction you have, you start a brawl or you start a physical fight, right? Those are very rare for human beings. We're very cooperative as a species with each other. But these baby monkeys weren't that way, right? So when they were put together, they started to go at it, right? They would kind of bite each other, etc. So there was a guy called John Bowlby who was from the United Kingdom. He was very curious about this lab, and he visited the lab in early 1950s, and he noticed that these baby monkeys, which have now grown into kind of adolescent monkeys, were very similar to the orphans that he was seeing in the United Kingdom, right? So remember, early 1950s, this was right after the Second World War, right? Lots of orphans, right, from all over Europe and England. So these are babies that have been brought up without a mother figure, without a father figure either, but often without a mother figure, without any real kind of parental figure, basically. And he said that these monkeys are exhibiting the traits and the characteristics of those orphans that I see in the United Kingdom. So he proposed this hypothesis to Harry Harlow that what might be happening is that because you've deprived these monkeys the kind of physical connection, right? What later on Harry Harlow would end up calling contact comfort, right? Contact comfort, skin to skin contact that babies routinely get from their mothers, especially mothers, but also, fathers and perhaps other members of the family, if you're not held, particularly when you're crying, right, when you need something, okay, then you kind of start to develop a certain set of abnormalities in terms of your psychological makeup. So this is what John Bowlby proposed to Harry Harlow. And then to Harlow's credit, he kind of pivoted from what he was earlier interested in researching, which is intrinsic motivation, to studying the importance of love and nurturance, as opposed to intrinsic motivation, right? It is later set of studies. What I'm going to show you in this video is actually a little bit disturbing. You'll see a kind of depiction of one of the experiments, or actually a few experiments that Harlow conducted, okay? So I'll just give you a little bit of a preview of what you're going to see, okay? So what Harry Harlow started to do is, he still separated these baby monkeys from their mothers, but he gave them two options in terms of alternative mothers, what he calls surrogate mothers, right? These are not actual physical living monkeys, right? Living monkeys, these are more like figurines made out of either wire, right? So they're harsh to the touch, okay, not comforting to hug, or made out of cloth, okay? And he wanted to see which monkey mother figure, surrogate monkey, the baby monkeys would choose to spend time with. And to kind of make it a difficult trade-off, what he did is that he placed a milk bottle with the wire mesh monkey. So even though the wire mesh monkey was harsh to the touch, not very comforting, not very comfortable to hug, but it had food, right, which you need for surviving, for survival. And the other monkey, which was clad in cloth, and so it was more soft, more like the skin of an actual mother monkey, but it did not have any source of food, right? So how would this baby monkey make this kind of trade-off? Which monkey would it go toward? Which monkey would it spend more time with, and so on? Okay, so that's the background. Let's take a look at this.
Harlow designs a set of ingenious experiments. He raises a baby monkey, allowing it to choose between two surrogate mothers, a wire mother that feeds it, and a cloth mother that doesn't. A cloth mother that Harlow thinks might provide something else, comfort and love.
Here's baby 106, weaned on a wire mother. He's going to the wire mother.
But this infant quickly runs to the cloth mother, where he will stay for the next 18 hours cuddling. In Harlow's mind, choosing nurturing over sustenance. In another experiment, Harlow creates a fearful situation. Whom does the infant turn to now?
Let's find out what his reactions to his mother are when we frighten him. That's all right. And he does what any child will do in a similar situation. He was running to his mother to touch her, to drive away his fear.
To Harlow, there is something about the experience of comfort and love, even more than food, that seems crucial to all these monkeys. But what happens when the infant is raised alone, without any mother at all, wire or cloth? In this situation, the orphan monkey stays alone. He won't even go to the cloth mother when frightened, but retreats into his own world. Harlow believes he has shown how want of love can damage an infant for life, and he worries the same is true.
Yeah, so he just finishes up by saying that he worries the same is true for humans as well. Okay, so it began this whole stream of research on attachment theory. And basically, the synopsis of the theory is as follows. Okay, so as an infant, if you need something, right? Your only way to express this need is through crying. You don't have any other way of expressing it. You haven't learned language, you can't do non-verbal, signaling, etc. The only thing you can do is cry. Okay? That's the only method you have to communicate that you have a need, and obviously babies have a variety of needs, right? They might feel sleepy, they might want to be petted to sleep, they might have a stomach ache, right? They might want to poop, what have you. So there's a lot of different needs that the baby goes through, and the only way to communicate that you have a need is through crying. So if the baby cries and the parental figure does not immediately come to the baby's rescue, right? The baby has one or two options, right? One option is to cry even more. So cry even more intensely, scream at an even louder voice, which is what most babies attempt to do first, okay? So this is what typically happens, is that the crying kind of intensifies. And if even after that, there's no response from a parental figure, then again, you can cry even louder perhaps. But at some point, the baby has to decide that, look, no matter how much I cry, help doesn't seem to be forthcoming. So I guess I'm going to have to take care of myself. Now, this is not a strategy, or this is not a thought process that's conscious, but this is kind of like the baby feels its way through this kind of conclusion, right? So those are the kind of like beginning stages of these two kinds of attachment styles, right? So if you kick and scream, you become louder and louder and louder until, damn it, you get your help, right? That's what later on, as you become an adult, develops into the anxious attachment style, the needy attachment style. On the other hand, if you end up concluding that, look, I'm going to have to build a wall around myself because I can't really trust people, right? I can't really depend on people to take care of me when I have needs. So I'm going to have to be self-sufficient at some level. Even though that conclusion is coming from a place of not having what you want, right? Or not getting what you want, not getting the love and the care that you desire. That leads to this avoidant attachment style, right? So basically, both of these attachment styles are called insecure attachment styles because they are rooted in the sense of insecurity about your relationship with others. There's a lack of trust, there's a lack of confidence that you're truly and well taken care of. Or that if you were to encounter problems in the future, that you will be taken care of. And so it shows up in a kind of more extreme and sense of desperation for getting that reassurance, or it shows up in terms of kind of spurning other people and keeping everybody at arm's length because you don't want to be hurt, right? Because you feel deep down that even if people seem like they're going to step in to help you, they'll abandon you at some point. Okay, does it make sense? Okay, so some interesting kind of factoids here. The proportion of people who were securely attached in the early 60s, which is when the research started picking up for human beings as opposed to monkeys, was about 85% in the United States. That's slowly and steadily been coming down to now maybe in the mid 60s, maybe even lower 60s in terms of securely attached. The number of insecure attached by definition has gone up basically. And unfortunately, this trend is true around the world. And this is a very controversial topic, but one of the big kind of factors that has increased the number of insecure attachment style kids is more women joining the workforce. Okay. Obviously, women joining the workforce is a good thing overall at a societal level, but it does come at some cost to the psychological health of the babies, right? Either men have to become caretakers and play the role that women traditionally have played across cultures across time, or we're going to have to find another kind of alternative to it. Okay, which, by the way, maybe robots and AI might be a potential solution, but I'm not kidding, right? Yeah.
So, introverts tend to be really like they're very friendly also. How does that different?
Yeah, so you know, this is not connected to introvert and extrovert, okay? So, see, the way that introverts and extroverts are defined, it's not so much whether you kind of tend to avoid other people or not. It's more about how do you feel after you've had to interact with people. Extroverts tend to feel energized when they interact with other people. They love a party, right? And they love the opportunity to get to know some, you know, sort of strange, like unfamiliar people. Introverts, on the other hand, their energy levels tend to drain if they are put in those kinds of contexts. And they tend to kind of feel more energized if they are by themselves for a little bit of time, or if they're only with people that they really feel completely comfortable with. Even if they're not explicitly interacting with them, just having them around them makes them feel comfortable. So that's the difference between introverts and extroverts. So you could be an introvert and your chances of being securely attached are no different from that of being an extrovert. Okay. Yeah.
If a child doesn't get love and comfort when in their early childhood, it could go either of the two ways, right? They could just be desperate for attention, or they could just be the avoidant attachment style. So what aspect determines which?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't know. It's not clear. Okay. What determines perhaps it's some deeper underlying genetic propensity, personality. Maybe some of the kind of later work is going to show that in the future. Any other question?
But don't you think even genetics contribute to your attachment style?
No. We know this because not just with human beings, also with rats and other animals. You could be adopted from a family in which all the rats were kind of avoidant. But if you come to a family in which you're given a lot of comfort, contact comfort, you're held by the mother mouse or rat, right? The pup is held a lot and given a lot of physical affection, then it doesn't carry over any of the effects. It's not genetic. But good question. Yeah. Any other question? It's almost like ragging, right? You know, you're ragged by your senior batch, you want to kind of pass on the ragging to the next batch. It's kind of a similar thing that if you're not given contact comfort, then you carry it inside of you, right? You may not even be aware of it, which is why I think it's important to talk about this topic. This scale, I'm going to have you guys fill it out on your own. I was going to do it inside class, but I want to err on the side of being conservative to make sure that we cover all the topics. Just 1 second, okay? So this is called ECR scale. Is ECR expands out to emotions in close relationships scale. Please fill it out. You'll see it in the email that goes out later today. It's for you to assess what kind of attachment style you have. You probably are somewhat, you know, already aware of the kind of attachment style you have, but it's good to get a confirmation. Needless to say, you have to be honest when you fill it out, right? I would say that don't just fill it out yourself. If you have a significant other or somebody who knows you really well, you feel confident that they know you well, have them fill it out on your behalf. It'll give you a good idea of your current attachment style. And regardless, I would recommend a book called Attached. Spell it out for you here. ATTACHED by a guy called Amir Levine. There's also a co-author on the book, but he's the main guy. So I would highly recommend this book, if not for yourself, just to be interested in this topic, because, you know, hopefully it won't happen, but you might end up marrying somebody who's like anxious or avoidant, right? So some other interesting things here. The marriages that are most successful, least divorce rates, are between two securely attached, and then goes down from there, right? True avoidance probably would never get married to each other, but it doesn't work well, okay? It's better to have an avoidant anxious rather than avoidant. Okay, so anyway, the other kind of thing that I had you guys do here is do your love language, right? So my own, I'm very physically affectionate. That's my primary love language, and quality time is very important for me as well. So I don't know what, how many of you guys filled it out? Okay, so again, I mean, this is something that I was hoping if you had time, I would have given you some time to talk to each other about it. But in the interest of making sure I cover all the topics, let's see if we have a little bit of time toward the end for this activity. But for now, I'll just not do that. Okay, but these are things that are important for you to be self-aware of, right? I think it'll really help you. Okay, so let me see, are there any other questions? Okay, so let me talk a little bit about what to do if you feel insecure in your relationships. And of course, we all are likely to experience some heartbreaks, some frustrations in terms of our relationships over time. And so even if you come from a securely attached background, oh, by the way, Gayatri, you asked a question, right? Sorry.
It's generational trauma because you just keep passing on the no love, no comfort thing because you didn't get anything. You just keep passing on that strength.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a high chance that happens. Now, if you end up marrying somebody who's securely attached, and again, not surprising, everybody finds a person who's securely attached to be more attractive because they're just more balanced emotionally, psychologically, right? They're more mature in terms of their response. They don't kind of, have bouts of emotional volatility that an anxious attachment style person might have, or the expressionlessness that an avoidant person might have. Both of those are not desirable or attractive. So even if one of the two partners, again, the other thing that I want to say here is that these are not like watertight compartments, right? It's a continuum. And so you could be, I don't know, I'm just throwing out some numbers here, but you could be like 98% secure, 2% anxious, things like that. But if you marry somebody who is secure, or like, in a partnership, one person is kind of on the unambiguous side of being securely attached, then that can make a difference, right? But yes, otherwise, I think there is a tendency for this to get passed on. There's a good movie that is not directly on the topic, but it's relevant to this. The name of the movie is Lion. It's kind of like actually set partly in India, where this person gets orphaned because he just walks into a train.
Australia.
Yeah, and then a couple from Australia picks this person up. But the reason why I'm saying it's relevant to this topic, Dev Patel is, the hero in it. The reason why it's relevant is because the Australian couple picks up two kids from the same orphanage. And one of the kids is who grows up to be Dev Patel, and the other kid is the other person. And this kid who grows up to be Dev Patel actually comes from a family that's loving and nurturing and everything. He just happens to, have bad luck. He walks into a train and then falls asleep there, and the train starts moving, and he ends up in Calcutta, right? But at that point, this kid is already. By the way, the person in the very last row with the laptop out, there's a strict no laptop policy, right? Please close your laptop. You too, man, right? Okay, so they end up in Australia, and they have very different kind of life arcs, right? So Dev Patel character actually is very healthy, psychologically healthy, and ends up performing really well in life, right? Or decently well. The other kid, though, has huge problems, right? And I don't know the background of the other kid, they don't show it in the movie, but my bet is that that kid did not get enough contact comfort, right? Whereas Dave Patel character did get it. So it turns out that the first 6 months, actually more like a year and a half, is very, very important in terms of getting this contact comfort. If you do not get that in the first year and a half of your life, there's a very high chance that you're going to be insecure in your attachment style. Okay, so what can we do in order to become more secure? So I want to talk about a few strategies here. So the first is to kind of revisit memories. Okay, let me just back up a little bit. So even if you come from a secure attachment style family, you've got enough contact comfort, etc., and a lot of love and nurturance and reassurance that you're taken care of. If you go through a series of kind of bad interactions, right? If you are, for example, if you're going through a breakup, right? And on top of it, things are not going well at work with your boss, there's a very high chance that you're going to operate from the mindset of insecurity at that point in time, either become very anxious or avoidant, right? Even securely attached people, this can happen. So it's kind of like a range of behaviors that you can exhibit, right? And you have a default tendency that's set in childhood, but doesn't mean that you can't move, right, from that. So there's a range. And so if you do feel insecure in your attachment style, what can you do? So one of the things you can do is to revisit memories from your childhood that kind of reinforce the sense of security in your attachments, security in terms of your relationship. So kind of like think back to the fun summer holidays maybe that you had, right? Or this, one grandparent figure that was always supportive of you, or maybe it was an uncle, right? Or a teacher. So everybody has somebody in their life, right? I mean, you'd be very, very unlucky to have 0 people in your life that really cared for you at a deep level. But just kind of pick those moments when you can recall those experiences. So that's number one. The second thing you can do is to give yourself the love and care that you were denied from other people. And this is called self-compassion. This is a huge topic. There's actually a book on this topic, also called Self-Compassion by somebody called Kristen Neff. And in a way, that TED Talk that I had you guys watch on emotional hygiene is on this topic of self-compassion, broadly speaking. So you want to treat yourself as a really good, caring friend would treat you, right? So that's the idea. And the logic behind that is quite simple, right? So if other people have not given you the love and nurturance that you deserved or you wanted, then you play the role for yourself as an adult, okay? And the last strategy is altruism. Okay, so here, the idea is that you are, rather than kind of wanting love, attention, kindness from other people, you're kind of turning the whole thing around and saying, how can I help other people out, right? And so it's understandably very difficult to do, particularly if you're suffering from lack of love, lack of kindness and compassion for other people, to be the agent of kindness, right? But if you can somehow do that, then that is the best thing that you can do for yourself in terms of becoming more secure in your attachment style, okay? Why? Because as I'll talk in a little bit, when you're kind and compassionate to other people take notice and they want to be kind and compassionate to you. And so they then start to kind of behave with you in a way that, addresses this problem of feeling insecure in your attachment style. But again, I want to preface all of this by saying that it is the most difficult thing to do, right? When you're feeling insecure, to be focused on other people's needs and desires and be kind to them, which is why the whole thing comes back to habits, right? If you're an altruistic person by nature, right? And you can become such a person by nature. I'll talk a little bit about some of the research on this, because we are hardwired to be altruistic, as it turns out, right? So the idea is that if you practice slowly in small, simple steps, just like with the healthy lifestyle, pick something that you can do that's easy to do, that nurtures your altruistic muscle. But if you do it on a consistent basis and it becomes a habit, then it's second nature to you to be altruistic to people. So no matter what you're going through, you're still going to exhibit that second nature, that propensity to be altruistic. And so that really will shield you from becoming insecure in your attachment style. Because people genuinely like you, people genuinely care for you, people genuinely want to be nice to you, people want to include you, even if you're going through low lows, right? That's going to happen. And so you're really shielding yourself and buffering yourself. In a way, you're kind of ensuring yourself against feeling insecure in your relationships if you're altruistic as a human being. Okay, so let me pause there again. Are there any questions? Yeah. Quality of relationships, what?
Can that make you avoid it?
Yeah. So, when I said that, even if you're secure in your attachment style in terms of your early childhood experiences, having a breakup, having a bad set of interactions with your boss, all of these can push you towards feeling insecure. So this is very much along the same lines, right? Yeah.
Altruism, if you're thinking about it, just for people who like it, or like selfish.
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think, Gayatri, you had the same question in the email to me. Okay. I think at a philosophical level, it may be difficult to argue against the idea that anything that we do is ultimately at some level selfish. But I've sometimes found it useful to kind of think of it 2 by 2. I don't know if I should actually draw it out, but on one dimension, you can think about your actions hurting other people or helping them. On the other dimension, you can think about actions hurting you or benefiting you. Okay. Now, no one's going to do actions that they hurt themselves and hurt other people, right? I mean, or there may be very, very few that fall into that category. It doesn't make sense. Why would anybody do that? We do have people taking actions that benefit them and hurt other people. Those would be called selfish acts, right? Then there would be acts that benefit others but hurt you. So these could be called meaningful acts, right? Where you sacrifice food for the sake of feeding a hungry person, right? So you could argue that those acts where, it's coming at some sacrifice to you is still benefiting you at a higher level because it's making you feel like you're a worthy person, or maybe it's even more cynical than that other people are observing you, you think, and you want them to think of you as a noble person or something like that. There is some element of self-centeredness even in those acts, right? You could argue. Of course, there may be acts that help you and help other people out, right? Which I won't talk about this, that's not very interesting. So, can you speak of any act as being purely altruistic? At a philosophical level, perhaps not, right? But you can definitely practice a habit for so long, right? That at this point, it's a habit, and just like brushing your teeth, right? Okay, initially it started because somebody told you to do it, and you were convinced perhaps that it's going to be healthy for your gums or teeth or whatever, right? So there's a health benefit, but that's not why you're doing it now. You're doing it, and you may not even remember doing it because it's a habit, right? So in a similar way, even if the starting point is strategic, if you end up at a place where you're doing it on autopilot, then who cares? Okay, but I will kind of come back to this a little bit in a little bit. Okay, I do think that in terms of altruism making you a happier person or making you feel happier, it is important that you're not doing it for strategic reasons. Okay, and I'll talk about why that is in just a little bit. Okay, so let me talk now of some research that shows that we seem to be programmed to be altruistic. So I'm going to go through about 4 or 5 studies here. The first study was conducted in the University of British Columbia. As students were going toward their classes in the morning, they were accosted by a research assistant who asked them if they'd be willing to participate in a study. And those who said yes were given an envelope. And the envelope contained two things. It contained some money and also contained instructions on how to spend the money. So one half of the participants got $5, the other half of the participants got $20. And one half in each group got the instruction to spend the money on themselves. Okay, the other was asked to spend the money on somebody else. So four kind of sets of participants, right? $5, $20, spend it on yourself, spend it on somebody else. And the idea behind this whole setup was to see if spending money on oneself makes one happier or less happy than spending money on somebody else, right? So a separate group of people were described the experimental setup, just like I described it to you guys, and they were asked to predict which group would be happier. And they predicted that those who got $20 would be happier than those who got $5, right? Makes sense. They also predicted that those who were asked to spend the money on themselves would be happier than those who were asked to spend it on other people. But that too kind of makes sense if you think about how we spend our money, right? Around the world, most people spend most of the money that they earn on themselves, right? They take vacations or buy something for themselves, eat good food, go to the movies, what have you. The proportion that's spent on other people, and by other people, I don't include family, right? Family is like an extension of yourself. So to charity, for example, those tend to be much, much smaller in proportion to money spent on oneself, right? So if we thought that spending money on other people would make us happy, you would see more people spending more money on other people. So, okay, so what did they in fact find? They found that the prediction group was wrong on both counts. Okay, the $5 group was not less happy than the $20 group. And that may very well be because as a poor student, getting any money is going to make you much happier, right? But more importantly, the prediction group was wrong in terms of the other thing they predicted. Those who spent the money on other people were in fact significantly happier than those who spent it on themselves. Okay, now in this study, there are a couple of problems, right? One problem is that this is the experimenter's money, right? This is not your own money. So, you can't really extrapolate from that experiment and say that, well, if you spend your own money on other people, you're going to be happier. All you can say is if you get free money from somebody, then give it to somebody else, then it might make you happier than spending it on yourself. So the experimenters kind of looked at data in which they looked at people who had actually spent money on other people, their own money on other people, or they hadn't, right? And so this was from Gallup, and Gallup had a survey that they had administered to over 120 countries around the world, okay? And in these surveys, they had a bunch of questions, and there were two questions in particular that the researchers were interested in. And one of those questions was, how happy are you right now? Okay, and the other question was, did you donate to charity last month, yes or no? Okay, so they looked at the answers to these two questions. And if donating to charity makes you a happier person, being altruistic makes you a happier person, then you should see a positive correlation between these two things. Here's with me? That's in fact what they found. Okay, so people who said that they donated to charity last month reported a higher level of happiness than people who said they had not donated to charity. So you see on this map all those countries in which donating to charity makes you happier, and these are the countries in green, and India is one of those, right? And a darker green means the effect is even more pronounced for you, for this country, right? So Russia, Australia, I guess Namibia, Botswana, some of these countries, Libya, I guess. These are countries in which there's a particularly strong and positive correlation between having donated to charity last month and how happy you report to be this one. And the effect was pretty big, okay? So they say in the paper that the effect of donating to charity on your happiness is like doubling your salary. So imagine that you earn 10 lakh rupees a month, 10 lakh rupees a year, okay? Let's be a little more realistic. Okay, so now imagine that you donate to charity, right? So some of the money that you're earning is now being eaten into. So you have less money left over because you're donating to charity. Your happiness would be the same as somebody who's earning 20 lakhs rupees a year, but not donating to charity, right? So that's how big the effect was. Okay, so there are a few countries in which the effect is negative, that is donating to charity lowers your happiness levels. You can see that country in the middle of Africa, there's Central African Republic, okay, Tunisia is another one there. So these are countries, Venezuela and South America. And I think that's Mali in West Africa. So there are some countries where the country is so poor, right, that if you have money, you're better off spending it on yourself. Don't donate it to charity. Okay, so at some level there is a kind of it's too costly, right? But if you're above a certain cutoff, then your basic needs are not in question anymore. Then it is actually good to engage in as much giving as you can. Okay, even costly giving, where you're depriving yourself of some comfort in order to help somebody else out. Okay, so yeah.
Belgium is also like pink color.
Oh yeah, I think this one here, right? I don't think it is Belgium. Or maybe Netherlands. Yeah, in this particular thing, map does seem like that country is it got a negative correlation. Yeah, I don't know why, because it certainly is not below basic need level. Okay, so I've talked about two studies that show a positive correlation between being altruistic and how happy you are. The question here is this effect because of a genetic hardwiring? That is, that are people hardwired to be agents of kindness? And so just like we're hardwired to like things that are sources of energy, right? So we like sweet things because they're high in calories. We like fatty things because they're high in calories. We are programmed to like those things. So similarly, are we programmed to be a kind person, right? So when we're kind, it makes us happy. Or could it be that we're socialized to believe that we're kind people? So society tells us that behave this way, and you'll be happy, or this is a good thing to do. And so you end up experiencing this happiness because at some level you're getting society's approval for behaving in that fashion, right? So there's two alternative hypotheses. And one way to test it is to look at whether toddlers, right, who are not being programmed by society yet, right? If they are given an opportunity to be kind and altruistic, do they experience happiness too? If they do, then it must be the case that at some level we seem to be hardwired to be, kind and altruistic. So the researchers did at least two studies that I'm going to talk about here, in which they gave toddlers, in the first study, they gave toddlers an opportunity to be altruistic. In the second study, they gave the toddlers an opportunity to witness a altruistic act. Okay, so let me talk about the first study, which involved these treats called teddy grams, which are very popular among toddlers in the United States. So the experimenters gave these toddlers who were participants in the study, obviously they recruited these toddlers through their parents. The parents brought these toddlers to the lab, and the toddlers were put on a seat, and then they were given some teddy grams to eat, right? 6 teddy grams to eat. And toddlers are going to be happy when they see snacks like that, right? So they videotape the toddlers' expressions, because you can't ask a toddler how happy you are, right? They're not going to be able to answer that question. So they evaluated the happiness by looking at videos of the facial expressions. And in the control condition, that's all the toddlers got. They got the 6 teddy grams, and the facial expressions revealed how happy they were. There were 2 other groups of toddlers that were given an opportunity to be altruistic. And in both of those groups, there was a monkey puppet sitting opposite these toddlers. In the first group, there's a monkey puppet sitting opposite, just to make sure that it's not just an effect driven by the monkey puppet, right? It's by this opportunity to be altruistic. So in the second, let's call it the second condition, the toddlers were given their stash of 6 teddy grams, and they were told that, hey, you can eat these, or you can feed the monkey puppet some of these, right, and eat the rest. Or you can feed the monkey puppet all of his 6 teddy grams. And the monkey puppet actually had a mouth that kind of chomped down, so it acted as if it was eating up the teddygrams. And in the third condition, the toddlers were given their 6 teddygrams, and they were told that, hey, you can feed the monkey puppet your teddygrams, or you can eat the teddygrams yourself and use the experimental stash, which is a separate stash there to feed the monkey puppet, right? So those are the 3 conditions. And what they found is that the toddlers seemed happiest. They were shrieking with joy and excitement in the conditions in which they were given the opportunity to be altruistic, given the opportunity to share, and the happiness levels are highest in the so-called costly giving condition, where they had to kind of part with their own teddygrams in order to be altruistic to the monkey puppet. Okay, so this seems to indicate that these toddlers derive happiness out of being altruistic. So it must be the case at some level, we are hardwired to be agents of kindness, right? It's not just something that's socialized into us. It's something that we are born with. So let me talk about another study, and then I'll get to this question that I'm sure some of you guys are wondering, which is that why is a toddler in my neighborhood not altruistic, right? Or my niece or my nephew, they're the kind of epitome of selfishness. So how can that be? Okay. So in the second study, I want to talk about, which to me is a more interesting study. The toddlers were asked to sit on their mother's laps in a corridor, and as the scene unfolded in front of the toddler. And so there's 1 or 2 scenes. One was a neutral scene, the other was a kind scene. Okay. So the toddler was sitting in the mother's lap, and in both scenes, 2 people cross each other in front of the toddler, walk in the opposite directions in front of the toddler who's sitting on the mother's lap. And in one of these scenes, actually in both these scenes, one of the people spills the things that they're carrying in their hand as they cross the other person, right? By accident, quote unquote. Okay, but obviously this was all done deliberately. And in the control scene or neutral scene, the other person doesn't do anything special to help this person out. They just kind of keep walking, right? So this person picks everything up and then keeps walking. In the kind scene, though, the other person kind of stops and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you spilled this. Let me help you," and then take all the things and then give it to that person, right? So the toddler is sitting there passively, not really involved in any of the activity, just observing either a scene of kindness unfold or a scene of neutrality unfold in front of them. Obviously, this is not a scene in which the toddler is going to get excited or laugh or smile or giggle, right? So that's not how you measure their happiness. So what the experimenters did was something kind of creative and kind of interesting. They trained these video cameras on the toddler's eyes. Okay, any guesses on why?
And we had actually the pupils.
Yeah, the pupils dilate. Okay, how do you guys know this? How do you know this, Shubham?
A little bit biased.
Okay, all right. So it turns out that our pupils dilate. Were you saying the same thing in the back? Okay, good. So our pupils dilate when we like what we see in front of us. It's almost as if our eyes are saying, "Hey, I love this, give me more," right? So I'm going to expand out and take in as much as I can. Okay, it turns out that this is true even in kind of dating contexts, right? So if you go out on a date and you like the person in front of you, your eyes are going to dilate, right? So maybe next time you go on a date, you want to kind of peer into their eyes and see the eye dilation. I'm just kidding, don't do it. Okay? So that's how they measured whether the toddlers liked what was going on in front of them. And as you can probably guess, their findings showed that the dilation was larger or higher when this kind scene unfolded in front of the toddlers. So basically, kind of like to summarize, back up a little bit and summarize what these findings show. They seem to show pretty clear evidence that being altruistic makes us happier, right? And not just as adults, even as kids. And this tendency to feel happier, therefore, seems not just socialized in us. It seems something that we are hardwired with. Okay. And this is important to keep in mind because, especially in a business school context, I think that the predominant message is that, hey, set your goals, and the best way to be happy is to achieve them, and we are kind of rational agents, right? And I think the implicit message there is that your happiness really lies in advancing your own kind of agenda. Okay, but it turns out that that's too simplistic. Our happiness depends on the progression and the enhancement of well-being of the people that we care for, perhaps society as a whole. Okay, and it's not as if we are isolated and we're independent. Okay, so our well-being, our personal happiness and well-being depend on the extent to which the people we care for, certainly, but even more broadly, I think society as a whole is also uplifted. Okay. And the reason why this happens at some level is because of the way that our brain is structured. Our brain has a set of neurons called mirror neurons, like the mirror, right, in your bathroom, mirror neurons. And these mirror neurons basically help us or facilitate our ability to imagine how we would feel if something that we see happening to somebody else is were to be happening to us. So it turns out that in particular, primates have mirror neurons. So human beings certainly have the most number of mirror neurons, but monkeys have it too. And so if a monkey sees another monkey eat food, it'll start to salivate, for example, right? Or if a monkey sees another monkey, of course, I'm talking about healthy monkeys here, sees another monkey hurt itself, it'll grimace, right? So when we go to a movie, for example, in fact, even in the monkey video that I showed you guys, I was looking at your facial expression, some of you guys were actually kind of like backing up a little bit when you saw the baby monkey being frightened, for example, right? So that's mirror neurons operating in you, okay? So we are psychologically programmed to empathize with other people. So how could it not be that we wouldn't be happier if we made them happier? Because seeing them happy makes us happy, right? That's what mirror neurons do. So I'm going to do a little experiment with you all now. And I'm going to evoke or try and evoke an emotion called elevation. And there are two videos that I have here. In the interest of time, I'll only show you one of them, but I would highly encourage you to watch the second one as well. Okay, I'm going to show you elevation 2, actually, the next video. And the idea here is to kind of give you more direct evidence that we are programmed to be agents of kindness, right? It's one thing to look at all the research and all of the data on it, but another thing to actually experience it yourself, right? So if we are programmed to be kind and compassionate, right? And not just that, we are programmed to such an extent to be agents of kindness and compassion that just seeing acts of kindness unfold in the world out there makes us feel warm-hearted, right? Makes us feel, this is a good word, right? Makes us feel warm and fuzzy inside of our hearts. If that is true, then it must be the case that we really have this deep desire to be nice to other people, to be agents of positivity, right? So just even on video in a classroom, in a business school, seeing two things being nice to each other makes us feel good, okay? So that's the basic idea. By the way, this emotion that we often feel when we see this, these so-called romantic movies or movies on love really are movies on elevation. What you see there are two, usually a boy and a girl, right? Who are, faced with a lot of obstacles, but they overcome all of them to kind of unite, right? So that's very 20-second summary of what happens in a lot of these romantic movies, where we're seeing two people kind of go out of their way to be nice to each other, right? And not be selfish, and, trying to be nice to each other, right? So that's the idea. So you'll see here that it's a similar thing, except that this doesn't involve human beings, but rather involves two animals. right, let's take a look.
Finally, tonight, Steve Hartman proves that best friends come in all shapes and sizes. Here is tonight's Assignment America.
Elephants retire. Many pack their derms for the Elephant Sanctuary in Tennessee. They arrive here one by one, but stay here two by two.
Every elephant that comes here searches out someone that she then spends most all of her time with. What are you doing?
Sanctuary co-founder Carol Buckley says it's like best girlfriends.
It's just like us, somebody that they relate to, they have something in common with. Oh, hello, how are you?
Debbie has Ronnie.
Best buds, these two.
Misty can't live without Dolores. And perhaps the closest friends of all.
Tara and Bella, of course.
There's no other elephant around here?
That's Tara.
Just these two.
And this is Bella.
This is her friend, and her friend just happens to be a dog and not an elephant.
That's hilarious.
Bella is one of more than a dozen stray dogs that have found a home at the sanctuary. Most want nothing to do with the elephants and vice versa. But not this odd couple. They are absolutely inseparable.
When it's time to eat, they both eat together, they drink together, they sleep together, they play together.
Tara and Bella have been close for years, but no one really knew how close they were until recently. A few months ago, Bella suffered a spinal cord injury. She couldn't move her legs, couldn't even wag her tail. For 3 weeks, the dog lay motionless up in the sanctuary office. And for 3 weeks, the elephant held vigil. 2,700 acres to roam free, and Tara just stood in the corner.
To me, it really was she was concerned about her friend.
Then one day, co-founder Scott Blake carried Bella onto the balcony so she and Tara could at least see each other.
And Bella's tail started wagging, and we had no choice but to bring Bella down to see Tara.
They visited like this every day till Bella could walk. Wow. Today, their love and trust is stronger than ever. Bella even lets Tara pet her tummy with her foot. They harbor no fears, no secrets, no prejudices. Just two living creatures who somehow manage to look past their immense differences. Take a good look, America. Take a good look, world. If they can do it, what's our excuse?
How's that for a preachy ending? They can do it. What's our excuse? Yeah, but it's well taken, right? So hopefully you experienced a little bit of this emotion that the researchers call elevation. If you're experiencing elevation to a person from the outside, you may not necessarily look happy, right? You might in fact look like you're going through a bad time. You're maybe crying. You might have a lump in your throat. You might find breathing a little bit heavy and difficult, right? But inside of your heart, you know that this is a good emotion to have. You are not wanting to have that emotion. And you also have intentions associated with elevation that have to do with altruism. You feel like, yeah, I want to be kind to the world. I want to do good things to the world, right? I want to be an agent of positive change. Okay, again, underscoring this idea that we seem to be quite hardwired for kindness. So this kind of brings me to the question, that I raised earlier but did not answer, right? Which is that how come some of the toddlers that are in our own lives, right? I can talk about my own children here, right? Sometimes they're like damn selfish, right? So how does this square with this set of findings? So the idea is not that, we are kind of, angels and that's it, 100% angelic nature. No, right? The idea is that we have the tendency to be selfish and follow our own agenda, even if it comes at a cost to other people or to society or to the environment or to future generations and so on. But that's not the only story either, right? So not only do we also have a huge desire to be altruistic, it seems hardwired in us. And perhaps it's just as strong, right? It's difficult to kind of say which of these is more strong. Sometimes, what the research shows is that really whichever tendency has been nurtured in you across time, if you're born in a family, for example, people who tend to volunteer for social service, etc., come from families that have other people that volunteer for social service, right? Whereas if you come from a family where nobody's done that, most likely you're not going to do it either. So our environment seems to be hugely important to us. Okay, which makes sense, right? If you think about broken window theory, which I think I talked about in an earlier class. My mind is a little bit foggy now, but basically the idea is that we mimic what we see in the environment. Okay? So if you're exposed to a lot of social service and acts of kindness, that's what we will also end up doing. But the basic point being that we have both sides to us, right? It's not a simple story. It's a little more complicated. But the fact is that the altruistic side, especially when it comes to happiness, tends to be underemphasized. We don't really know, or we haven't known until recently, that being altruistic can actually be hugely beneficial for us in terms of making us feel good. Okay, which brings me to why. Why does it make us feel good? One part is that, we are hardwired, which is what that first picture kind of, depicts, is that we are by nature programmed to be kind. The second is something that, has come up already, right? This idea that when we are nice to other people, we know that they are probably going to want to be nice back to us. So we set ourselves in these kind of, positive, virtuous loops of positivity, right? So there's a strategic reason to be kind to other people because other people will be kind back to us, right? And so it makes us happy when we are kind to other people because of the outcomes of that kindness, which is that other people are kind back to us. But the most important reason, perhaps, for adult human beings is this one, right? Which is that the story you tell yourself about who you are when you're a kind person, particularly if you engage in somewhat costly giving, right? You don't want to engage in such costly giving that when you don't have anything, you give away what you have, right? We saw that in the Gallup poll studies. Some of these African countries where they're so poor that donating to other people actually hurts their happiness. No, you don't want to do that. But if you're above a certain level of access to basic needs, then giving to charity, being kind, rising above your own set of life situations and problems in order to be nice to other people, helps you kind of develop this view of yourself as a abundance-minded person, right? So you think of yourself as a magnanimous person, a person with an expansive heart. You're like a queen or a king, right? That you're able to rise above your situation in order to be nice to other people. It's not like you don't have problems, but you can tell yourself the story, or you do tell yourself the story that, hey, I might have problems, but that doesn't keep me from being focused on other people, right? That's a very self-affirming and elevating perspective to have about who you are. So contrast that with somebody who's needy, right? Needy person is like, my cup of love is running on empty. Please pour more into it, more into it. It's a never-ending, cup. It's a bottomless cup. Or that of an avoidant, which is that nobody understands me, so why should I care, right? This is one where you're saying to yourself that I have problems, but I am so generous that I can rise above them. So it's a very positive story to have about who you are. It's a big reason why it makes you happy. Okay, so last very quick couple of topics, and then we'll see if there are any questions, and then we'll do the quiz. So I've talked about how being altruistic makes you happier, lots of research on it. What does it do to our chances of success? Right? This is important because we are in the business school, right? And not just because we're in the business school. I think it's one thing if something makes us happy, but comes at a cost to our success, right? Now, earlier I talked about how happier people are more successful. So if being altruistic makes you happier, then chances are it also makes you successful, right? Particularly in the long run. But what about immediate success and things like that? Okay, so there's a guy called Adam Grant who started to look at this question. What's the relationship between being altruistic and being successful? And he summarizes this in a book that came out exactly 10 years ago, in 2014. The name of the book is Give and Take. So he categorizes people into 3 groups based on what he calls reciprocity styles. Okay, so that's the term that he uses to describe people's kind of tendency when they interact with other people, okay, and the kind of motivation when they interact with other people. So one group of people he calls takers, Takers are people who, when they're interacting with another person, they are primarily kind of viewing that whole interaction through the lens of what's in it for me. Okay, so any interaction they have, they'll be like, at the very least, I want to be entertained, right? Ideally, I also kind of reap some positive functional benefits out of it, either a contact or a better grade or, more money, etc. So they looked at relationships and interactions with other people through the lens of what's in it for me. On the opposite end of the spectrum, he calls them givers. Givers are looking at interactions from the lens of how can it be of help, right? Does this person need a kind of shoulder to cry on or a ear to listen to this person? Maybe they're going through problems at the very least, or maybe there's a more kind of functional way in which I can help them. Maybe they're having problems with understanding an assignment, right? Not that they're overly focused on only helping other people out, but if they perceive that whoever it is that they're interacting with has a need, has a problem, then their motivation is to try and solve that problem. Okay, now the third category, he calls them matchers, and he finds that most people, most of the time, are matchers. Matchers are people who, when they interact with another person, are looking to be fair, right? If they do something good for the other person, and it need not be anything like major, it's like, for example, I said hi to you, right, first, proactively, right? Now I expect you to say hi back to me, not just completely ignore me, right? So matchers, most of us are matchers most of the time. When they do something nice to other people, they expect something nice in return. If somebody does something nice to them, then they feel obligated to return the favor, right? So his question is, which of these three groups rather, which of them has the highest chance of succeeding in conventional terms, in terms of earning more money, in terms of being promoted, in terms of achieving higher status, right? Higher power, and so on. And what he finds is kind of surprising to many people is that givers rise to the very top of organizations. Okay, followed by matchers and then takers, but then givers also sink to the very bottom of organizations. Right? So basically it turns out that the category of givers bifurcates into two groups. Okay. And to cut a long story short, basically what he finds is that the givers who rise to the very top are the so-called otherish givers. Okay. And the givers who sink to the very bottom are selfless givers, which is kind of sad, right? So selfless givers are the kinds of givers that we have in mind when we think of an epitome of a giver, somebody who's like genuinely nice-hearted, who gives to everybody, anybody all the time, right? Is indiscriminate in their giving. Engages in a lot of costly giving. Okay? You might have a grandmother or somebody in the family that you know of like that. So givers, the type of givers who rise to the very top are the so-called otherish givers, and this is a word that doesn't exist in the dictionary that Adam Grant invented, basically to kind of like connote the opposite of selfish in a sense, right? So opposite might be selfless, but there's also this idea that, you're not only focused on your own advancement and priorities, you're also focused on others' priorities and agendas. And so otherish means that when you're interacting with people, you're really primarily interested in the group welfare, right? Not just your own, you're not selfish, okay? But you're not selfless. That is that you're not undermining yourself either. You're not becoming a doormat, right? So you recognize that you're just as important as other people are, right? And so you're fair to yourself as well. So you include yourself, as he puts it, you include yourself in the circle of reciprocity. Okay, you include yourself in the circle of reciprocity. The really big difference between otherish givers and matchers is that matchers are not quite as proactive in doing things for other people, okay? And matchers are also not primarily interested in the group welfare. They are just responding to events as and when they're happening. They don't go in with the agenda of let's try and enhance everybody's welfare, okay? So that's the main difference, but otherwise they're pretty close, okay? So you want to be an otherish giver So you want to go into any interaction wanting the enhancement of the group welfare. And the thing that's going to differentiate you from a selfless giver is that you're going to follow these three rules, as he calls it. Three rules for giving. So one rule that others givers follow, that selfless givers don't, is that others givers try and give in ways or engage in acts of altruism in domains or with stakeholders that make them feel emotionally charged. They are having fun in the process. So for example, if you're an animal lover, like how many of you guys would put yourself in that category of being animal lovers? Okay, how many of you guys don't really like to hang, be honest, right? Like to hang out with old people? Do not. Okay, right? So, so you do not want to then volunteer for an old age home, right? You'd rather volunteer for an animal shelter, right? So you've got to kind of like figure out what really makes emotional, like, sense to you, right? Uplifts you emotionally. Some of us like to hang out with children, perhaps, maybe others don't, right? Some of us might care for the environment a lot, right? Others may not care for it a lot. Some of you might be really, really bothered by lack of cleanliness, right? Which I'm bothered by in India, to be very honest, right? So that's what perhaps I would want to volunteer for, right? As opposed to some of the other things. So basically, connect with something that is deeply emotionally meaningful to you and try and have fun in the process, right? Because you're going to run low on emotional kind of charge and battery in the process of being given, right? So you want to make sure that you're doing something that is to you meaningful and hopefully even fun. So that's number one. Number two is what he calls containing the cost of giving. Containing the cost of giving. I'll give you a couple of quick examples here. Imagine that one of your friends comes to you and says, hey, I missed out on the class because I was traveling. What happened? Right? Can you summarize the class for me? Right? If you wanted to contain the cost of giving, if you do want to kind of hold a review session, right? Walk them through the notes that you took, etc. You might ask this person, is there anybody else in your group that also wants this help, right? And so you might gather everybody who missed out on this class in order to do a review session for all of them together rather than do it individually, right? Or if you actually don't remember what happened in class, right? One way to contain the cost of giving would be to say that I actually don't remember, I'm really sorry, but I know that somebody else took like copious notes. Or you might say that Raj actually recorded the whole session and he said that he was going to share the recorded link to everybody. So basically you wouldn't just abandon them, but not necessarily take up the onus of helping them all onto yourself either, right? So basically you're still focused on the end objective of helping other people out, but you're doing it in the most efficient way, in the least costly way, okay? And the final rule that they follow is to see the impact of their giving, right? So this doesn't mean that people are necessarily egotistical or, are actually not altruistic if they want to see the impact. But basically the idea being that if you are an agent of positive change, right? You're donating to a, let's say an orphanage, right? You want to see that, your act is effective, right? We all have a desire for competence. I'm going to talk about it in tomorrow's class, okay? And so you want to see that your, effort or your money or your resources are not being spent in vain. And so seeing that impact, right? Seeing the smiles on the orphans' faces, for example, is going to re-energize you, is going to motivate you to continue to give. So that's the basic idea. So it could be an anonymous donation, but what the research shows is that actually seeing the impact of the giving, positive impact of the giving, kind of helps you, continue to give a little bit longer than you otherwise might. It helps you from not burning out, basically. Okay, so that's basically the idea that selfless givers end up sacrificing their own success and later on even their own happiness because they burn out. Right? They're not having as much fun in the process. They are kind of burning the candle at both ends, right? They're not taking care of themselves. And perhaps they're not even seeing the impact. Okay? So you want to avoid those kind of mistakes that the selfless giver makes in order to reap the benefits, not just in terms of happiness, but also in terms of success. All right. Okay, so we're at 3:25. I know that we have a quiz, but I want to very quickly just spend maybe a minute to see if there are any questions, any comments about anything. Right, let's do the quiz. By the way, guys, I'm really, really sorry. I'm just realizing that I'm really supposed to go into 3:20, right? Okay, I'm really sorry. In my mind's eye, I was going to 3:30, which is why, okay, so I'll shut up now, but I apologize.